This boy who looks like a little girl is truly amazing. In this world where magic reigns supreme, the nobility of one's bloodline determines the strength of their magical power. For instance, a newborn royal baby can casually unleash powerful spells, while in his previous life, Lloyd was a commoner whose fireball, even with all his strength, was pathetically weak. In contrast, a noble's casual spell would be at the peak of his capabilities. Consequently, Lloyd was burned alive. Despite this, he didn't despair. Instead, he was captivated by the beauty of noble magic. Lloyd was born with an obsessive fascination with magic to a pathological degree. Before dying, he wished to learn more magic, and as fate would have it, he was reincarnated as a royal noble. Seeing the maids around him, he, still confused about his situation, thought they were enemies and released a small fireball, which unexpectedly pierced through the ceiling. Now, he is the 7th prince of the Kingdom of Sharum, Lloyd. 10 years passed in a blink, and because he had many older brothers above him, he didn't have to worry about inheriting the throne. So Lloyd pushed aside all unrelated classes to spend all day studying in the magic library. However, severe academic imbalance was not tolerated for nobles. Every time he went to the library, he was anxious about being caught by the maids. Since his destination was always the same, he was often ambushed and caught by the swordsmanship instructor, Silpha. He would then be forcibly taken to the training ground because, as royalty, it was essential to be proficient in both physical and magical arts to maintain dignity. Given his poor performance, he had to use some tricks to get by. In a matter of seconds, they exchanged dozens of moves. At first, Silpha went easy on him, but when Lloyd used magic, it felt like she was fighting a mirror image of herself. Although his swordsmanship was on par, they were not in the same weight class, and he couldn't defeat her with just that. So, he used his tricks to make up for his shortcomings. After enhancing himself, they fought evenly, but it was still hard to determine a winner. To quickly return to studying magic, Lloyd suddenly changed his tactics during the duel, using a feint to expose her weakness, and then knocked her out with a slight force. Thinking he could finally end the training, he was outsmarted by Silpha, who saw through his magical cheating and quickly counterattacked, knocking Lloyd back. Silpha could see through even the slightest changes. Despite this, she highly praised his incredible talent, noting his ability to cast 2 spells simultaneously, and murmured to herself, "Silpha will never leave you." In the evening, Lloyd was forced to bathe with the Shotokan enthusiasts. It was then that he heard a rumor from them. Long ago, there was a demon named Grimoire who was powerful enough to destroy a country. He was later sealed in a book by a mage, and that forbidden book is now sealed beneath this castle. Upon hearing this, Lloyd trembled with excitement. So late at night, he used invisibility magic to bypass the guarding soldiers and reach the deepest part of the castle. Facing the strongest barrier set up by 10 mages, it shattered into pieces in less than 2.5 seconds. Entering the library, he then used his own barrier to reinforce and strengthen it, allowing him to browse the books without worry until he found the forbidden book containing the demon. However, soon the target walked right into the trap. Seeing that it was Lloyd who unsealed the door, the demon began to persuade him, claiming that the seal on the magic book would fail eventually anyway. It suggested that Lloyd might as well unseal it now and promised infinite gold in return. However, Lloyd wasn't a fool. He worried that if released, the demon might harm the country. In response, the demon assured him that its enemies were long dead and it wouldn't cause any more trouble. Additionally, it offered to teach him ancient magic that had been lost for ages. On further thought, the demon assumed that a child like Lloyd wouldn't be interested, but Lloyd was precisely aiming for that. Seeing his interest, the demon continued to deceive him, and eventually, Lloyd excitedly unsealed it. At that moment, the demon thought it was invincible, unaware that in the face of absolute power, it was always a clown. It sent a dark flash cannon towards Lloyd, but in the next second, all the damage was blocked by Lloyd's barrier. Lloyd commented that it was a strange and unique spell, asking the demon to release it once more. To the demon, this was a blatant provocation. Enraged, it launched a frenzied barrage of attacks. Meanwhile, Lloyd was only excited, never worrying that the barrier might break. He was even curious about the form of the magic attack. So, he deliberately opened a small gap and used his finger to experiment. The moment he touched it, he quickly retracted his finger. This move left the demon dumbfounded, but Lloyd was thrilled as if discovering a new continent, completely absorbed. Grimoire was shocked and furious. As it unleashed its ultimate move, Lloyd found it quite interesting. Although humans can't have two mouths, it didn't mean he would give up. Soon, the ultimate move ended, and the barrier remained intact. Lloyd looked at it expectantly, wanting to see more ancient magic. At this moment, the demon finally realized the seriousness of the situation and tried to escape without looking back. However, it couldn't outrun Lloyd's barrier, which enveloped the entire library. While the demon thought it was to prevent its escape, Lloyd explained that he couldn't control his power well, and if he destroyed the castle like he did when he was born, he would get scolded. Having endured 2 rounds of the demon's attacks, it was now Lloyd's turn. Under the intense light, a fierce flame attack erupted. The once intact library turned into ruins. Lloyd was confused why the demon didn't set up a barrier for defense and instead took the damage head-on. He even began to suspect it had a masochistic tendency. In the next moment, Lloyd effortlessly restored the entire library to its original state. This scene shocked the demon, who could only kneel and beg for mercy, swearing loyalty as Lloyd's subordinate. Hearing this, Lloyd immediately agreed and instructed the demon to take on a harmless appearance. However, the demon still had its own plans. It thought that as long as it stayed close to Lloyd, it could seize the opportunity to possess him. With Lloyd's power, it believed it could rule the world. But soon, it was astounded by the density of Lloyd's magic, unable to even insert a finger. Currently, being unable to fight back, it had no choice but to obediently act as a mascot. One day, the second prince, Albert, took him to the magic shooting range. With a casual flick, Albert launched a fireball that accurately hit the farthest target. The onlookers immediately began to praise him, as he was the most likely contender for the next king. When Lloyd's turn came, he knew he couldn't be too conspicuous, lest he steal the spotlight from his older brother. So, he decided to let his fireball just graze the edge of the target. However, he didn't realize that this was even more remarkable. In no time, every target was grazed. As for Albert, he remained silent throughout, and then declared that he needed to rest inside for a bit. Seeing the spectators leave, Lloyd no longer had to hide his strength and could do whatever he wanted. He prepared to try Grimoire's double chanting. Normally, a person can't have 2 mouths, but just as Grimoire was feeling puzzled, Lloyd took off his glove and absorbed it into his body. Normally, people wouldn't dare to do such a thing, as they would typically be possessed by the demon. However, Lloyd's high-density magic power made him unafraid. Now, the two shared one body. Just as Grimoire was about to cooperate with him in chanting the high-level spell Inferno Fireball, Lloyd moved his mouth slightly, startling Grimoire. After Lloyd's explanation, it became clear that he had compressed the repeated incantations. Though it was just one short word, it contained an enormous amount of information, almost causing Grimoire's mind to break, let alone cooperate in chanting. Seeing time running out, Lloyd had a sudden inspiration and directly took over Grimoire's mouth, allowing him to multitask and chant 2 spells simultaneously. What shocked Grimoire even more was that Lloyd managed to fuse high-level water and fire spells, combined with an enormous amount of magic power, capable of causing catastrophic damage. In that instant, Grimoire realized that if this spell hit the surface, the country would surely disappear from the map. Meanwhile, ministers couldn't understand why Albert valued Lloyd so much. Hearing this, Albert thought they were fools. The feat of grazing all 9 targets without missing one was impossible to attribute to coincidence. Thus, he believed that Lloyd was destined to become a great sage in the future, and maintaining a good relationship with him would be his strongest card in the competition for the throne. At this moment, the ministers sensed something was wrong. Why had the sky darkened? The truth was that the atmosphere had been pierced by Lloyd's magic, covering an area large enough to envelop the entire castle. Grimoire once again fell into fear, grateful that it had surrendered quickly. Not long after, Lloyd had absorbed all the knowledge of the library into his mind. With nothing else to do, he set his sights on magical equipment, and exploring dungeons was his best option. Not only could he encounter more unseen monsters, but he could also experience the thrill of treasure hunting. Seeing this, Grimoire firmly opposed it, as letting this human-shaped nuclear weapon run around was extremely dangerous. However, Lloyd didn't know what it was thinking and pulled out an acorn, using wood magic to create a perfect replica. This way, he could sneak out without being noticed, as long as he didn't run into Silpha, who could notice even a 0.7 millimeter growth in Lloyd's height. Next, he stuffed Grimoire's soul into the replica, allowing for remote control and information transfer. Grimoire couldn't help but marvel at the precision of the replica's craftsmanship, even including a magic circulation system. Realizing what this meant, it excitedly shouted, seizing the opportunity to do whatever it wanted while Lloyd was away. At this moment, Lloyd sighed, feeling that taking Grim as a familiar was indeed the right choice. This made Grim blush with emotion. Only after flying 2.5 kilometers away did Lloyd realize he'd forgotten to check the location of the dungeon. Below, there was some commotion. Upon closer inspection, he saw a few beastmen chasing a girl with twin tails. She seemed to be in danger, but in reality, she was luring the enemies deeper, leading them to a suitable position for a sudden counterattack. This must be what they call a martial artist. Seeing a martial artist for the first time, Lloyd was quite excited. According to the books, there was an energy called chi in foreign lands, circulating within the body through breathing and unleashing incredible power. In short, Lloyd was now very interested in chi. The twin-tailed girl sensed Lloyd's presence and asked who was hiding there. Feeling there was no need to hide anymore, Lloyd stepped out. But Grim reminded him that revealing himself like this could easily expose his identity. Meanwhile, the impatient twin-tails approached him proactively. At the critical moment, Lloyd quickly completed his disguise. Now, his identity was that of a new adventurer named Robert. Using double chanting, he fused his appearance with that of his older brother, creating a unique Robert. The girl, named Tao, was a superficial romantic. She became an adventurer to meet her destined partner, but unfortunately, the men she met all preferred delicate girls. Now she firmly believed that meeting Lloyd was fate. Lloyd, sensing she wasn't quite normal, prepared to leave and solo the dungeon. However, the twin-tails clung to Lloyd and quickly brought him to a nearby B-rank dungeon. With just a slight effort, she could instantly kill any enemy, thinking that Robert would be deeply impressed by her power. However, he wasn't even looking. Later, under Lloyd's persistent questioning, she explained that chi was similar to the magic power used by mages, with the key to chi practice being the breathing technique. It required extensive training to feel the chi within. As the twin-tails continued to promote herself, Lloyd had already started practicing according to her instructions. Within a few breaths, his lungs were almost bursting from the massive chi intake. Seeing this, Tao hurriedly tried to stop him, never imagining that Lloyd had already grasped half of it and was even fantasizing about combining chi with magic power. Seeing Lloyd's serious and absorbed expression, the twin-tails also felt gratified and decided to teach him more about chi. The scene shifted to Grim leisurely sipping afternoon tea in the castle, only to be startled by the yandere lowly lover Silpha appearing from behind. Seeing her smile, Grim felt his fate was uncertain. Back at the main scene, the twin-tails demonstrated one of her few long-range attack techniques. With the boss defeated by a chi bullet, the treasure chest that appeared ahead was their reward for clearing the dungeon. However, considering how little the dungeon had developed, it was clear that the prize wouldn't be great. Unexpectedly, the ground cracked open in the next moment, revealing a skeleton. Lloyd remained unfazed. The girl never imagined encountering a lich in an ordinary dungeon, a monster even A-rank adventurers couldn't handle. She could have taken the opportunity to escape, but the opponent not only mocked the chi techniques she had dedicated her life to studying, but also declared that a girl's rural martial arts weren't even worthy of being devoured by him. Such disdainful arrogance made the girl decide to go all out. She resolved to teach the lich a lesson with her martial arts. No matter if it rained or snowed, Tao had never even held a man's hand, foolishly dedicating herself to hard training, so she wouldn't allow anyone to look down on her anymore. Tao's full-powered close-range killing move directly shattered the opponent's barrier. However, she exhausted herself so much that she couldn't even maintain her breathing. But she never expected to hear the lich's voice again from behind. To the lich, the chi techniques she had devoted her life to were not even as powerful as the magic he could release with a single finger. At this moment, Tao's body was completely immobilized, and all she could do was await death. At the critical moment, Lloyd appeared, using a barrier to block the attack. Moments earlier, he had thought Tao had knocked him away to solo the boss. Seeing her in danger now, he decided to step in. He also had something he wanted to try out. In an instant, Lloyd's gaze grew intense. He appeared directly behind the Lich, using the chi techniques he had just learned to accelerate his chanting speed. Even the Lich couldn't see his movements clearly. Unfortunately, Lloyd couldn't yet use chi techniques proficiently in combat, so he generated a barrier to resist attacks while further contemplating the fusion of chi and magic power. He took a deep breath, deeper than usual. In the next moment, Lloyd began moving with the barrier. However, to the Lich, it seemed as if Lloyd was choosing to flee, prompting the Lich to increase his attack frequency. The next second, Lloyd's barrier shattered. The Lich thought his attack had worked, unaware that Lloyd had voluntarily dissolved his defensive barrier to inhale more chi. Gradually, Lloyd began to interweave chi and magic power. While dodging attacks, he continuously increased the fusion's degree. When there was nowhere left to dodge, Lloyd launched his first counterattack. He shattered all incoming attacks, but wasn't satisfied with the result. He wanted to make the ring thinner. This time, his attack formed an arc and reached further. At this point, Lloyd had fully entered a state of magical mania. His terrifying laughter made the Lich feel oppressed. Overwhelming attacks bombarded the Lich, and ultimately, Lloyd's self-developed attack instantly killed him. After the battle, the two found a worn-out knife in the treasure chest. Tao thought it was just a useless weapon, but Lloyd noticed that some kind of magic was imbued in the knife. Before he could examine it closely, the chest suddenly sank into the ground. It turned out that after retrieving the treasure, the chest would disappear along with the dungeon. Seeing this, Lloyd had a wild idea. Could the chest be alive? The chest hands over the treasure, and then seizes the chance to escape. Lloyd believed that the treasure chest was the core of the dungeon. Lloyd persistently clung to the treasure chest, successfully taking this core with him. After bidding farewell, he flew towards the royal city. It was only then that Tao realized she hadn't exchanged contact information with him. Oh no. I let a good man get away. 2.5 hours later, Lloyd returned to the royal city. The first thing he saw was his substitute, which had been played with and damaged. It turned out that even Silpha hadn't realized it was a substitute and had taken the demon to practice swordsmanship. However, the demon had become much weaker and couldn't defend itself at all, ending up crying from the beating. After comforting Grim, Lloyd began to study the worn-out knife he had just obtained. He first soaked it in hot water and then gently scraped the blade with a tool. Gradually, he successfully removed the magical enchantment from the blade. This small piece of rune work was a magical substance called magic marrow liquid. This liquid could be used to inscribe runes on weapons for enhancement. Lloyd's task was to study the enchantment magic. However, the amount of magic marrow liquid obtained from the knife was too small. If he failed, both the precious liquid and the weapon would be wasted. Therefore, Lloyd decided to first analyze the magic marrow liquid and then mass produce it on his own. Using analytical magic, he successfully decomposed the magic marrow liquid into its original main ingredients. Now, he needed to acquire these 3 primary ingredients and a large number of weapons. The most precious of these, red magic powder, Lloyd obtained by decomposing the dungeon core. He then found his father and asked him for a large bag of silver coins. Surprisingly, this made the king think that his 7th son was very frugal, as he didn't even ask for gold coins for pocket money. After refining the silver coins, Lloyd found Silpha. This time, he engaged in a big battle with her. The technique of using chi to increase chanting speed surprised Silpha, but in the end, her rich experience as a swordmaster led to Lloyd's defeat. Even though he lost the battle, Silpha still gave Lloyd the oil that was part of their wager. With the last ingredient in hand, Lloyd synthesized the magic marrow liquid. Next, he found his brother and requested a large number of weapons. Of course, his brother would do his best to fulfill his cute little brother's request. However, this troubled a few soldiers nearby, as in their eyes, the 7th prince was just a child, and they feared that the enchantment magic would fail, wasting their weapons. After bringing the weapons to his room, Lloyd began to frantically enhance them. He was in charge of writing the runes, while the substitute handled miscellaneous tasks, with Grim cheering Lloyd on. Even with Lloyd's exceptional talent, enchantment magic was extremely difficult. any slight mistake could completely ruin the weapon. As the materials were continuously consumed, they finally created their first enchanted weapon. 2.5 days passed this way, and Lloyd successfully enchanted 50 out of 120 weapons. Initially, he had succeeded with 80, but later attempts to add more runes resulted in some failures. This astonished his brother, who couldn't believe it. After all, even top-tier enchanters only had a success rate of 10%. At this moment, his brother realized that although he had always known his younger brother was exceptional, Lloyd's magical talents far exceeded his imagination. Meanwhile, a nearby soldier couldn't believe it either and thought they were just unfinished ordinary weapons. However, he was taken aback when, after sheathing his sword, the scabbard at his waist was cut clean in half. Subsequently, his brother took the enchanted weapons to hunt magical beasts. Silpha, Lloyd's maid and teacher, insisted on accompanying Lloyd when she learned he was heading to the perilous monster forest. Their mission was to subdue the beasts attacking the villages in the forest, providing an opportunity to test the power of Lloyd's enchanted weapons. Unexpectedly, before encountering any magical beasts, they were attacked by monsters. Lloyd, of course, had to conceal his strength and thus acted harmless. Unbeknownst to them, he had already sensed the approaching monsters using the chi techniques taught by Tao. Though this was just a basic chi technique, it proved unexpectedly useful in reality. At the same time, the soldiers began to engage the monsters. The swords they wielded were the iron swords enchanted by Lloyd. No one had expected that with just a light slash, the monsters' bodies would be cut like paper. Some soldiers were even afraid to use their swords because they were too sharp. In an instant, all the monsters were eliminated. Surprisingly, despite using an ordinary sword, Silpha killed more monsters than anyone else. At that moment, a surviving monster suddenly revived. However, before Lloyd could act, an unexpected person saved the day. It was Tao, whom Lloyd had encountered before. She had sensed someone nearby using chi techniques and thought it was the handsome man Lloyd had previously disguised as, so she came over. Immediately, she recognized that Lloyd was using chi breathing techniques. Although he wasn't the handsome guy she was looking for, his breathing habits were identical. Before she could say more, Silpha cut down another attacking monster with a single stroke. But that wasn't the main issue. Seeing a strange woman standing so close to Lloyd, Silpha couldn't just stand by and watch. Instantly, the atmosphere between the two women became tense. Fortunately, Lloyd's brother arrived in time to mediate, and even invited Tao to join them on their mission. That evening, Tao learned of their prince's identity. However, she was more concerned that although Lloyd's brother resembled Robert in physique and appearance, she didn't sense the same aura from him. Instead, Lloyd's aura was identical to the one she was looking for, leaving her quite puzzled. Lloyd didn't expect that his detection breathing would attract Tao. However, there was nothing he could do now but try to avoid Tao as much as possible. He also learned why she was there. Tao had accepted a commission from the villagers to repair the temple on the mountain. At this moment, a wolf-shaped magical beast appeared from the shadows. This was the target of Lloyd's mission, the bear wolf. Given the current situation, Lloyd decided not to take action and stayed behind Silpha to observe the battle. Only Grimm noticed something unusual about the distant temple. On the other side, the soldiers were encircling the bear wolf. Despite its enormous size, it was exceptionally fast, making it difficult for the soldiers to handle. Fortunately, Tao intervened, taking down the bear wolf with a single chi blast. At this point, Lloyd's brother also decided to join the fight. He drew the magical sword enchanted by Lloyd. The sword glowed as he chanted an incantation, and a massive fireball exploded in front of them, incinerating the bear wolf to charcoal. Even he was surprised by the sword's overwhelming power, all thanks to Lloyd's enchantment. Everyone thought the trouble was over, but suddenly, purple magic energy appeared above the charred remains of the bear wolf. In the next second, the supposedly dead bear wolf stood up again, accompanied by several others of its kind. The most bizarre part was a hand slowly emerging from the bear wolf's mouth, followed by a being calling itself the demon Pazuzu. In the next instant, all the bear wolves launched an attack simultaneously. Despite the group's superior strength, the wounds they inflicted on the bear wolves regenerated instantly, plunging everyone into a tough battle. Lloyd, however, remained unconcerned and curiously asked Grimm about their opponent. Grimm explained that Pazuzu was a demon sealed in the temple, capable of altering the nature of magic at will. He used this ability to create magical threads, controlling the bear-wolves like puppets and continuously supplying them with magic to enhance their regenerative abilities. Grimm stated that without defeating Pazuzu himself, the battle would be unwinnable. But Lloyd wasn't worried about the group. Instead, he began asking Grimm about changing the nature of magic. Grimm was incredulous. How could Lloyd be interested in learning such things when everyone was fighting hard? What Grimm didn't know was that Lloyd wasn't panicking because there was someone present who was even stronger than him. On the other side, Pazuzu observed the situation. Though he acknowledged a few skilled individuals among the opponents, he dismissed the soldiers as mere weapon-reliant grunts and mocked Lloyd as a scared little kid with his nanny. Little did he know that he had hit the biggest nerve by looking down on the two strongest people present. Furthermore, he had now angered the yandere maid. Silpha's gaze changed, her terrifying killing intent making even Tao shudder. The entire battlefield became her domain at that moment. At this moment, the demon had no idea what kind of monster he was facing in the form of this woman. He merely thought she was incredibly foolish. With magic that regenerates wounds, how can you defeat me? He sneered. Besides, our endless magic is our specialty. Silpha had no interest in listening to him. She activated her taunts, prompting the demon to launch a frenzied attack. However, none of his strikes could harm Silpha in the slightest. Finally, the demon realized that Silpha was a troublesome opponent. He decided to concentrate most of his magic on himself, which caused the other bear-wolves to regenerate more slowly. Meanwhile, Grimm was teaching Lloyd how to change the nature of magic. This delicate technique usually takes a long time to master, but Lloyd managed to learn it in just 2.5 minutes. Pazuzu couldn't believe that such a powerful swordsman was merely a nanny for a child. Seizing a moment when Silpha was distracted, Pazuzu tried his luck again. Earlier, he had merely mocked Lloyd. Now he went further, continuously bad-mouthing Lloyd in an attempt to distract Silpha. Just as he thought his attack had succeeded, Silpha appeared right in front of him, her anger ignited. Under the moonlight, a single double-edged strike left Pazuzu struggling to defend himself. Amidst the flashes of swords and blades, he fell to his knees, leaving everyone stunned by Silpha's severity. The demon was being overpowered by Sword Saint Silpha, but he had a trick up his sleeve. Throughout the battle, he had been releasing his miasma. When it activated, everyone present fainted, except for Tao, who barely managed to stay conscious using her breathing techniques. The demon then revealed a new form, immediately sending Silpha flying with a powerful strike. He charged forward, aiming for a final blow, but Tao intervened just in time to block the attack. Silpha was now completely incapacitated. Tao believed she was the only one left capable of fighting the demon. However, the opponent instantly appeared behind her. Tao reacted quickly, launching a counterattack, but the demon dodged it effortlessly and captured her with a single strike. Worse still, Tao's breathing had been disrupted, and the miasma began to invade her body. She had no choice but to use all her remaining strength to unleash her final move. Before she could catch her breath, a bear-wolf bit her from behind, and Pazuzu remained unscathed. Eventually, Tao exhausted her strength and was swallowed whole. Just as the demon was reveling in his triumph, Lloyd's voice rang out from behind. The demon suddenly realized that Lloyd was not poisoned. What surprised him even more was the cute creature beside Lloyd. A closer look revealed it was a demon like himself. Pazuzu began to mock Grimm's appearance, which made Grimm's veins bulge with anger. However, knowing that Lloyd was about to beat Pazuzu senseless, Grimm did not retort. He simply told Pazuzu to be ready to cry for his mother. Lloyd then made his move. The magic in his hand continuously changed forms. Despite claiming he wasn't good at controlling magic, the magic in his hand transformed into various flower shapes. The warm magic created a sea of flowers, causing all of Pazuzu's minions to betray him. At this moment, Lloyd had seized control of all the bear-wolves. The first thing he did after taking control was to command the bear-wolves to spit Tao out. On the other side, the demon perceived that Lloyd would not be easy to deal with, and immediately released more miasma, intending to use it to wrest control from Lloyd. However, the bear-wolves suddenly remembered the memories of their parents being killed by Pazuzu. In a frenzy, all the bear-wolves launched an attack on him. This infuriated Pazuzu completely. To him, the bear-wolves were creatures he had personally raised, and now they dared to turn on their master. Pazuzu swiftly knocked all the bear-wolves to the ground. In the next second, his body began to surge with magic. He then challenged Lloyd, declaring that no matter how strong Lloyd's magic was, it would be useless. "Magic cannot kill me because demons are beings formed from magic," he said. As he spoke, his magic withered the surrounding flower fields. However, the demon had no idea that he had provoked a magic fanatic with extraordinary power. At that moment, Lloyd was entirely focused on figuring out how to use magic to kill him. In an instant, Pazuzu was terrified by the dark magic emanating from Lloyd. Overwhelmed with excitement, Lloyd's abnormal magic power made Pazuzu tremble. By the time Pazuzu thought of fleeing, it was already too late. Lloyd, finding it not amusing enough, absorbed Grimm into himself and began dual chanting. Instantly, more barriers appeared to chase Pazuzu. Even when he tried to escape into the ocean, the barriers relentlessly pursued him. Pazuzu exclaimed, half praising himself for his quick thinking, yet ultimately found himself trapped within the barriers. Finally panicking, he continuously rammed into the barriers, but to no avail. What awaited him was Lloyd's terrifying magical experiment. 4 types of magical formations activated simultaneously, continuously harming Pazuzu. When the light from the magic faded, Lloyd showed a disappointed expression. "You said magic couldn't kill you? It hasn't even been 5 minutes, and look at what happened," he remarked. At that moment, Lloyd's brother regained consciousness. To hide his true strength, he hastily attributed all the credit to his former persona, Robert. In his final moments, Pazuzu transferred all his remaining magic to Grimm, entrusting his ambitions to him. Upon returning to the capital, Lloyd and his brother reported the demon incident to the king. To Lloyd's surprise, his brother mentioned Lloyd's enchanting talent and even suggested to the king that Lloyd be given the right of succession. After some consideration, the king decided to give his youngest son a chance. However, Lloyd declined the succession rights, as his mind was entirely occupied with magic-related pursuits. The bear wolf that clung to him had followed them back to the city voluntarily. Lloyd named it Shiro, and its fluffy appearance was incredibly adorable. Even Grimm felt jealous and transformed himself into a fluffy form to compete for affection. At this point, Silpha also arrived, her injuries not being severe. Meanwhile, Tao continued her search for Robert. The girl possesses an extremely special ability. She can communicate with any magical beast. She is Princess Aliese of the Sharum Kingdom and also the elder sister of Lloyd. Since acquiring the bear wolf Shiro, Lloyd became interested in training magical beasts. Although Shiro can understand simple commands like sitting and shaking hands, it struggles with more complex instructions. Even when Lloyd tried to embed commands using magical power, it only confused Shiro further. Thus, to tame Shiro, both siblings immediately thought of Princess Aliese. The magical beasts she raised did not disappoint Lloyd. Not only did they appear silently behind them, but one even managed to sneak off with Silpha's hairband. This beast was a fen. The girl possesses an extremely unique ability. She can communicate with any magical beast. This beast, a higher breed of the bear wolf known as Fenrir, was precisely Shiro's relative. However, Lloyd's interest lay elsewhere. He realized that to perform the series of actions he saw, Fenrir must have received a series of complex commands. Thus, to acquire this skill, Lloyd directly sought to learn from his sister. However, what he did not anticipate was that his sister actually knew nothing about formal training. She was able to communicate with magical beasts solely through her love for animals and a natural talent. After meeting his sister, Lloyd unexpectedly detected fluctuations in magical power. He noticed that she unconsciously emitted magical energy from her mind, not through her fingertips. Realizing this, Lloyd began his own experiments. Without saying a word, Shiro suddenly sat up and followed a command to circle around 3 times and bark. After leaving his sister, Lloyd encountered his older brother Albert, who mentioned someone wanted to meet Lloyd. This person was also Lloyd's brother, Diane, the 4th prince of Sharum Kingdom and a top blacksmith. Diane had gone abroad to learn blacksmithing skills when Lloyd was young. Upon returning, he learned of Lloyd's enchantment abilities and sought him out, skeptical that his young brother could master such a skill. The ensuing demonstration shocked Diane. Lloyd enchanted a longsword in just 2.5 minutes, with impressive speed and intricate patterns. Convinced, Deanne proposed a collaboration. Deanne's dream was to forge a magical sword. Unlike merely enchanting a sword, Deanne wanted to integrate magical formulas into the forging materials themselves. This way, even an ordinary person without any magical talent could wield significant power through the magical sword. Lloyd was immediately interested, and they began working on forging magical swords. They decided to infuse the first sword with fire magic because it was more impressive. Lloyd suggested integrating an advanced fire magic spell, flame-splitting fireball, but Diane initially thought it impossible due to the complexity of the spell. However, Lloyd managed to compress the lengthy spell into just 2 segments. After this adjustment, the two immediately began to merge the materials. But the next moment, the entire material shattered. Lloyd then adjusted the spell to 4 segments and enlisted Silpha's help for the physical labor. But despite their efforts and exhausting the materials, they did not succeed even once. Just as Lloyd was utterly perplexed, Grimm discovered that there was a problem with the magical marrow liquid. After decomposing the liquid, it was found to contain not even a trace of red demon powder. This would have been fine for crafting ordinary weapons, but it was far from sufficient for creating a magical sword. However, red demon powder is exceedingly rare, and they had no solution at the moment. Lloyd had thought about sneaking into the dungeon next time to loot treasure chests, but Silpha immediately voiced this idea. In order to broaden Lloyd's experiences, the king also agreed to this proposal. Consequently, Lloyd and Silpha went to the Adventurers Guild to register as professional adventurers. After filling out their information at the guild's front desk, Lloyd became a bit panicked when it came time to test their abilities through a crystal ball. He had used one of these in his previous life. The crystal ball, containing a trace amount of magical power, could assess the user's abilities. Lloyd thought that if he touched it now, the ball would surely shatter. Wanting to avoid drawing too much attention, Lloyd started to suppress his magic power internally until it was incredibly diluted. Even so, his magical power level was off the charts. However, due to his recent suppression, his overall capability was only rated as E-class, which made the adventurers behind him laugh, claiming they had never seen such a poor overall rating. However, the receptionist had a different perspective. She remarked that his magical power could rival that of the silver-haired swordswoman. As soon as she said this, the adventurers behind them became displeased. The silver-haired swordswoman was a legendary adventurer, her almost ghostly strength having conquered numerous dungeons. Even though she had retired many years ago, she remained a legendary figure. How could this kid possibly compare to her? Silpha ignored the adventurers behind her, eager to quickly accept a dungeon assignment. However, she was informed that at least one adventurer of B level or higher was needed. Just as Silpha was about to re-register, a man came up to flirt with her, but was frightened away by her sword skills. It turned out that Miss Silpha was the esteemed swordswoman herself. At that moment, Tao appeared. Tao had been searching for Lloyd, disguised as Robert, but couldn't find any trace of him. So, she shifted her target to finding Lloyd's brother. This time she could help with the quest application under the condition that they introduce her to a handsome man. Thus, the 3 of them and 1 dog began sweeping through the dungeon, aiming specifically to reach the dungeon's core, treasure chest. By evening, Diane and Albert were chatting casually in the palace. It turned out that the Sharum Kingdom was soon to face a war, and Diane's return was also meant to enhance the military's equipment. However, Albert saw it as more important to reacquaint the long-separated brothers. He assured them that they could focus on researching magical swords while the war was handled by others. By then, Lloyd had also returned, holding the treasure chest in his hands. After some effort, they successfully forged the magical sword. However, the power of the magic sword was a bit too exaggerated, leaving both princes completely stunned. The sword was later named the Magic Sword de Lord. A few days passed, and the kingdom began mass-producing a less powerful version of the magic sword, dubbed the Fireball Magic Sword. The second brother also equipped the ordinary soldiers with these swords. At the same time, Lloyd sensed something was amiss in the recent atmosphere, as if something was about to happen. There was a strange person outside the house. Just how mad could Lloyd be? He could easily overpower any enemy with his magic, yet he insisted on only using his weakest physical combat skills. The first to strike was a man in a black robe. As he kicked, He also threw his robe to obscure Lloyd's view. Taking advantage of the moment Lloyd was distracted, he moved behind him and unleashed a skill. However, Lloyd was not to be outdone. The projection magic he had just activated allowed him to possess Tao's combat skills constantly. But at that moment, the opponent's arm twisted bizarrely, and Lloyd was caught off guard and struck hard by a punch. It turned out that Babylon was a soft-bodied curse-bearer, whose body's flexibility allowed him to perform tricky attacks. Then Lloyd felt an immense heaviness on him. It was the man in the mask. Any word he spoke would turn into a spell and become reality. Attacking at the same time was the bald strong man. However, they never expected that the spell could be physically broken through. Yet the bald strong man's abilities still trapped Lloyd. He could transform magic into highly viscous threads. But in the next second, Lloyd broke free from the restraints at the cost of his clothes, feeling immensely excited inside. The fourth assassin attacked from behind, but luckily, Lloyd blocked the attack in time. Strangely, she stabbed her sword into her own thigh, and at the same time, the same wound appeared on Lloyd's thigh. Any enemy reflected in Taria's eyes would forcibly share the pain. At that moment, the battle seemed extremely unfavorable for Lloyd, but little did they know, all the disadvantages were intentional by Lloyd. What interested him at that moment was the underlying principles of these people's abilities. The upcoming battle would be a one-sided overpowering because Lloyd had already tested everyone's attacks. Next, he only needed to test their defenses. The next second, Lloyd healed Taria's wound, shocking her immensely. Then Lloyd had a twisted idea. He enhanced his double-edged sword and replicated Silpha's swordsmanship. The first victim targeted by Lloyd was Babylon. If it were an ordinary person, he would have been cut in two instantly, but Babylon relaxed his body at the moment of impact to reduce the damage. However, the immense impact still knocked him out. The bald strongman and the man in the mask immediately came to support, but their skills could not keep up with Lloyd's speed, even affecting their own companions. The man in the mask became the second victim, and before he had a chance to speak, he was knocked down. The third victim was Taria. However, relying on her counter-damage ability, she calculated that the opponent wouldn't harm her. But how could she know that the boy in front of her was a madman and a freak at heart? He attacked Taria to enjoy the reflection of pain. The next moment, he directly blasted the bald strongman back. Now, only a little girl remained, but she had not made a move from the beginning. Just as Lloyd was about to begin his experiments again, the bald strongman stopped Lloyd. He explained that Ren could not control her toxins. Once she activated her ability, everyone present would be affected. It was then that Lloyd realized that all of them had somewhat lost control over their abilities, which is why they ended up as assassins. Afterwards, Lloyd struck the bald man. But contrary to expectations, Lloyd's strike was not an attack. Knowing that the man could not control his magic, Lloyd inscribed a spell on the back of the bald strongman to help him control his runaway magic. Seeing their companion was unharmed, the rest also ceased their attacks. Earlier, Lloyd had spotted Ren outside the house. She had intended to flee, but unbeknownst to her, the area was already surrounded by barriers. With no other choice, she used her ability, emitting a potent toxin from her skin. But seeing that her opponent was just a young boy, Ren only used enough to make him pass out. While Lloyd was incapacitated, she forcefully broke the barrier with a kick and then made her escape. Little did she know, Lloyd had intentionally let her go. The toxin had no effect on him at all. Lloyd's purpose was to locate Ren's hideout. He had heard about the Assassin's Guild from Silpha back at the Adventurers Guild. From Ren's actions, which lacked any trace of presence, he deduced that she must be a member of the Assassins. They dared to infiltrate the royal palace, and Lloyd felt he could not ignore this. Moreover, the rumor that each of them possessed unique abilities piqued Lloyd's curiosity even more. Back to the present, Lloyd had inscribed spells on everyone, believing that they were not truly evil, thus helping them. Indeed, once their abilities were restored, they felt nothing but relief at being ordinary people again, and gratitude towards Lloyd. The man in the mask even made Lloyd a new set of clothes. In their eyes, Lloyd had become their benefactor. Later, the guild members also shared their backgrounds. It turns out the Assassin's Guild had a boss named Jade, whose ability was teleportation. Due to a curse, He was involuntarily teleported to random corners of the world. Not just him, other members were also unable to live normal lives due to their abilities. Thus, these like-minded individuals became companions, living together in the city's cellars. A change occurred when Jade returned this time. He proposed establishing an assassins organization to take on illegal cases that the Adventurers Guild couldn't handle. They would leave a coin at the scene after each successful mission, to let people know their existence wasn't to be feared, and also as a way to search for a method to return to normalcy. But before he could finish, he was teleported away again. Since then, they had been operating as the Assassins Guild, but their reputation had gradually become notorious. Suddenly, a letter appeared on the table out of nowhere. By the time Silpha arrived, all that was left was the letter Lloyd had left behind. She immediately reported this to the second prince, and Lloyd's message read, "I am heading to Rodest with everyone from the Assassins Guild." The second prince panicked upon reading it, knowing that the kingdom was preparing for war with Rodest. At such a critical moment, could it be a kidnapping? Seeing his younger brother's sticky clothes, Albert thought of something terrible and decided to take action. When the assassins received Jade's letter, they were overjoyed. The letter wasn't lengthy. Jade wrote that he had become the Lord of Rodest and was arranging a banquet at his manor, waiting for everyone to come, except Lloyd sensed something was amiss. Normally, members of the Assassins Guild were cursed, but why could Jade send the letter so precisely? This indicated that he had full control over his teleportation ability. Everyone was reluctant to believe Jade would deceive them, but Ren preferred to think that he had mastered his powers later. Lloyd reassured her not to worry, that he would accompany them and would resolve any trouble that might arise. However, she didn't know that Lloyd, the magic enthusiast, was merely interested in Jade's teleportation ability. Lloyd then magically transported everyone to Rodest, but he didn't expect that they were all so weak. Barely 10 minutes of flight had them all vomiting. The most absurd case was Babylon, whose body was bent over by the wind. Thus, they decided to rest in the forest. Ren volunteered to find food, seemingly very familiar with the area. As it turned out, her body's toxins had killed her parents when she was young, so she had lived alone in the forest ever since. It was Jade who had reached out to her in the forest, picked her up, and despite everyone's objections, decided to keep her despite her toxic condition. Now the clothes on Ren's body were also made stitch by Jade and his companions, making Jade's presence very special in her heart. Their relationship was more like siblings than not. Apart from Ren, other members of the Assassins Guild also had different stories with Jade, but without exception, Jade had saved them all. He had always led the guild, and it was because of him that they all lived actively. It was on this day that Jade confessed something to them. He was actually the third son of the Lord of Rodest. Initially, he approached them for utilitarian reasons, all to stop his own family from starting a war. He wanted to prevent it at all costs, and needed partners to achieve this goal, so he had deceived everyone. Jade apologized loudly to them for this. However, the others had no reaction to his words. But having been through so much together, everyone was willing to believe in this man, believing he would become a lord and lead them to a happier life. Afterward, they continued towards the Rodest Manor. At that moment, Lloyd fell asleep peacefully. As they were about to reach their destination, Ren suggested that they should leave Lloyd here while the rest of them went ahead to scout the area. After all, the letter from Jade was somewhat strange. They couldn't possibly let their benefactor walk into danger. The others agreed with this proposal. However, it was this action that nearly cost them their lives within the castle. When they reached the top of the castle walls, what they saw was a banquet in full swing, and Grimm did not sense even a hint of murderous intent. Just as they were preparing to head back, the castle's steward spotted them. In a blink, they were brought to the center of the banquet. Everyone welcomed their arrival, and only then did they finally relax. At that moment, the main host appeared, and seeing Jade after so many years, they couldn't help but shed tears. Seeing him manipulate his clothes with his powers, they confirmed that Jade had mastered his abilities, realizing that their previous concerns and suspicions were unnecessary. Grimm pushed Ren forward, knowing she had a lot to say to Jade, but when she finally stood in front of him, she found it hard to speak properly. The next second, Jade's face twisted into something terrifying, forcing everyone to kneel. Ren could hardly believe her eyes, unable to believe that Jade would attack them. At that moment, Jade ordered the people around to choose bodies. Just then, a magic ray struck Jade. It turned out to be Grimm, who had not yet departed, taking action. He shouted for everyone to run immediately and to take Lloyd with them. He was just about to reveal Jade's identity, but at that very moment, the opponent teleported behind him and kicked Grimm, who was a demon. Even more unbelievably, Jade saw through Grimm's demon identity at a glance, and in his eyes, a powerful demon was just a weakling. Meanwhile, the kicked Grimm, by coincidence, flew towards Lloyd, waking him up from his sleep. At the same time, strange black shadows crawled out of the mouths of the people inside the castle, mocking humans as an inferior race. Jade finally revealed the truth. They were demons he had brought from the demon world, and Jade too was from that place. He desired something on this continent, and that was the body with the ability to teleport. His real name was Gizarm. At this point, everyone finally understood that the person before them was not Jade at all. Jade had died long ago, and Gizarm had spent months occupying his body, continuously tormenting Jade in the spiritual world. Gizarm used his companions to relentlessly torment Jade's spirit, luring them here to seize their bodies. When Jade discovered this, in order to protect his companions, he chose to commit suicide. However, he did not know that his body housed no ordinary being. Even though the body was dead, Gizarm could revive it. No matter how Jade tried to die in various ways, he could not die normally. He repeatedly experienced hellish torment until Jade's spirit was completely extinguished, and Gizarm then took over his body. He also grabbed Ren, using Jade's voice to evoke memories Ren least wanted to remember. Even though the people nearby were extremely angry, they were completely unable to move an inch. At that moment, Gizarme noticed the spell on Ren. Gizarme felt terrible, so he began to interrogate Ren, wanting to know who exactly that person was. At that time, the sky lit up, which also surprised Gizarme. At that moment, a huge crater was blasted out of the castle, and the members of the Assassin's Guild survived under the protection of a barrier. Lloyd first healed Ren's injuries. Then he urged them to leave immediately. Ren wanted to say something, but the bald, burly man immediately carried her away. He understood that Lloyd's mention of resolving the trouble meant that Gizarm was not yet dead. Sure enough, just after they left, Gizarm teleported to the ground. He ordered the demons to chase after the fleeing group, but Lloyd blocked them. At that time, 2 remaining demons attacked Lloyd. The next second, the opponent merely said, "Die," and magic rushed towards Lloyd. This move actually penetrated the barrier. In that instant, Lloyd considered only one thing: whether to experience the damage of this attack. But he chose to dodge the attack. At the same time, Lloyd also used identification magic, which confirmed his suspicion that it was instant death magic. If Lloyd had been hit with Gizarm's magical power, the attack might have reached his heart. At this time, Grimm also revealed Gizarm's identity. In the demon world, demons also have a clear hierarchy, divided into levels from 1 to 10. Grimm himself was a level 3 demon. Lloyd thought Gizarme might be the highest level of demon, but Grimm indicated that this was not the case. The opponent's power was of a higher order. He was a noble demon. Demon aristocrat, where even 100 level 1 demons combined could not defeat any of the aristocrats. This guy was a genuine monster. Grimm said all this actually hoping Lloyd would immediately flee. However, although Lloyd appeared to be a frail young man, his heart was that of a complete madman. In his previous life, he died due to madness, and even after reincarnation, he remained insane. Moreover, given the opponent's hateful actions, Lloyd was even less likely to let him go. Gizarm felt the same way, thinking that since Lloyd dared to spoil his plans, he should pay the price. Gizarma was the first to strike, transforming the magic in his hands into a spiral-shaped long needle, and then he launched it. It only took an instant to break through 2 layers of the barrier. Although this attack did not penetrate the barrier, compared to the previous attacks, the speed of the magic needle was faster. But that was just the beginning. Gizarm again summoned long spears of the same nature. This time, not only were there more in number, but their size was vastly different from before. For a while, Lloyd could only keep dodging, immediately generating a new barrier if one was breached. He tried to escape into the castle, using various terrains to delay the attack. However, the long spears could easily penetrate buildings. Then Lloyd went underwater, but this also could not stop the spears. Guisarme teleported onto his barrier and kicked it, sending him flying. Meanwhile, the Assassin's Guild was blocked by the city gate and could only wait for Babylon to open it. On the other side, Guisarme also spotted the Assassin's Guild on the bridge. He was not worried about his minions being defeated, but instead casually lifted Jade's body, whose potential was immensely vast. Now he had finally obtained the body he so desperately desired. He let Lloyd witness the power of a fully matured strength. In an instant, several long spears continuously pierced Lloyd's body. At the same time, the demon who was previously immobilized forcefully broke through the ground. Seeing the enemy about to catch up, Taria stepped forward and activated her power. She, with perfect control of her ability, could activate it on anyone she saw. She chopped her own ankle to immobilize the opponent. She did this to stay behind and cover her comrade's retreat. Unfortunately, the demon's regenerative abilities were clearly stronger. Without hesitation, she stabbed her foot with a knife to immobilize the demon again. The bald, burly man pushed Ren out as the city gate closed. He decided to stay behind with Taria and face annihilation with the demons. The demon, sensing something, thought of a plan. Indeed, the next second, Taria brought the knife to her neck, meaning she could drag all the demons to hell with her. Ren was devastated. On the other side, Guisarme kept taunting the guild members. Just as he was about to prevent Taria from committing suicide, noises came from behind him. It turned out that the one attacked was a decoy. It seemed the battle was just beginning. Lloyd suggested changing the location, which confused Guisarme. Suddenly, countless armies appeared at the city gate. The flames were from the magic swords Lloyd had created earlier. At that moment, Silpha took out her exclusive weapon. The blade had no fancy magic, only runes that pursued two things: ultimate sharpness and flexibility. When Silpha drew her sword, it was the death knell for the demon. In just an instant, the demon vanished under Silpha's sword. Silpha, with a murderous look, scared the members of the Assassin's Guild. At this time, Ren gathered the courage to explain. She indicated that Lloyd was fighting for them, and there was no deception in this regard. Just then, a demon suddenly attacked Ren. Fortunately, Aliezi saved her and spoke for Ren, noting that this little girl had no ill intentions. Otherwise, Fenrir would have devoured her. Hearing this, the second prince decided to temporarily trust the guild members. Now, the more pressing matter was to deal with the recovered demons. He ordered the strongest, Silpha, to find Lloyd. Meanwhile, Lloyd had already noticed Silpha and the others. Suddenly, Guisarme's teleportation magic appeared in the sky, and countless long spears instantly destroyed the only bridge. This prevented Silpha and the others from entering the castle. Lloyd had previously suggested changing location to have a more spirited fight. Guisarme agreed to the proposal, and even helped Lloyd by destroying the bridge. Meanwhile, the demons that fell into the river all gathered at the city gate. The army wielded the magic swords previously created by Lloyd, with the fourth prince's sword being the most powerful. Demons naturally possess a high resistance to magic, making them difficult to defeat in a short period of time. The second prince initially wanted Silpha to take action, but when he turned around, he realized she had not followed the group. This was to be a battle of mourning for the ordinary people of Roadstep. At the same time, Silpha was still figuring out how to cross the bridge. She had Shiro jump directly across, though the distance was indeed too far. Nevertheless, driven by the thought of Lloyd ahead, the foolish Shiro leaped without hesitation. As expected, Shiro fell into the river. Meanwhile, an unexpected change occurred on the bridge. Suddenly, a slash attack came, and to their surprise, a demon was lurking beneath the broken bridge. After exchanging a few moves, it became clear to the demon that Silpha was a master swordsman. However, he was not panicked at all. He revealed that while his companions were only level 10 demons, he was a master of the strongest faction in the demon world. Unexpectedly, Silpha thought of him as nothing but a pile of dung. A battle was imminent. The demon's so-called strongest faction was indeed not weak, capable of blocking Silpha's dual blades, and even executing sword moves with non-human, strange movements. The two were evenly matched for a time. during which Silpha's headband was cut, and blood flowed from her head. The demon was wounded as well, but in an instant, the wound on his head healed. He arrogantly expressed his admiration for Silpha's body, assuming a sword-drawing stance with a completely different aura. In the next second, he lunged at Silpha. Taking over a body, the demon would gain not just the physical form, but also the years of technique and memory accumulated. He described humans as mere clothing for them, and now he had set his sights on possessing Silpha's body. Her response was a counterattack. Silpha completely disregarded the demon's words and successfully replicated his sword technique. At that moment, Shiro climbed out of the river, his fluffy body hiding many things, until Silpha took out the sword Lloyd had given her. Lloyd had known all along that Silpha had never used her full strength because no weapon could withstand her technique. Realizing this, he crafted a sword for her devoid of any fancy magic, with runes that pursued only the utmost sharpness and the strongest flexibility. Silpha named this sword Demon Slayer, and with it, she instantly killed the demon. The boy had never imagined that a demon capable of teleportation magic could be so troublesome. First was the magic spear, not only extremely fast, but powerful enough to easily penetrate 2 layers of barrier. However, this was manageable as long as he maintained a 3-layer barrier to block the magic spear's assault. However, the demon's second move, Curse Speech, followed closely. Since it was purely magical, it could directly penetrate the barriers, and being hit meant instant death. Originally, this instant death magic was not fast, but Gizarm had combined it with the magic spear, completely compensating for the slow speed of Curse Speech. Yet that was not all. Gizarm's third move, Shadow Wolf, was the one that truly troubled Lloyd. If one stayed in the same place for more than 2 seconds, Gizarm would lock onto the coordinates and launch Shadow Wolf. This also forced Lloyd to keep moving quickly. In contrast to Lloyd's jumping around, Gizarme was essentially a magical artillery, trying to exhaust Lloyd's stamina with endless spells. Such a whimsical tactic could only be afforded by a demon with immense magical power. However, this ignited Lloyd's fighting spirit, and he attempted to turn defense into offense. With a chanting speed faster than that of the Shadow Wolf, he launched a magical attack within 2 seconds, but it was dodged by Gizarme. Lloyd's magic dried up the entire lake, causing a large amount of steam to rise around them. With visibility impaired, Lloyd resorted to sensing through breath. Gizarme could teleport to any location at any time, and Lloyd had previously relied on this skill to pinpoint his location. At that moment, Grimm reminded Lloyd to keep moving. However, while flying, Lloyd thought of something odd. How exactly did Gizarme lock onto locations? Gizarme had once said that even he would have difficulty finding the location of someone from the Assassin's Guild if they fled, which is why he had set a trap to lure them in. This meant that the teleportation magic must have some kind of activation condition. Lloyd guessed that it was line of sight. Thinking this, he immediately stopped, and sure enough, Gizarme did not launch any magic at him. Thus, the steam actually worked in Lloyd's favor. Now, any magic Lloyd would cast was guaranteed to hit the enemy. Yet, he stubbornly wanted to fight with the magic sword in his hand, even if close combat would allow the opponent to continue using magic. He wanted to land a strike with this sword. Lloyd's tactic was a multitude of puppet clones, something Gizarm had not anticipated at all. However, he did not panic. Instead, he deliberately endured all the attacks. By the sensation of being pierced through, he determined that only the sword at the neck was real. The next second, Lloyd was impaled by the Shadow Wolf, while Gizarm's wounds had already healed. He surmised that Lloyd saw magic as ineffective against demons, and thus risked close combat with the sword. He coolly stated that even if his heart and brain were destroyed, he could regenerate quickly. Previously, Jade's continuous suicides were revived by my healing ability. Gizarme thought Lloyd was dead, but suddenly realized that everything was just Lloyd's plan to confuse the enemy. For a while, both sides were at a stalemate again. Lloyd generated countless clones, while Gizarme teleported his clothes onto himself. If he knew the coordinates in advance, he could teleport items even outside of his line of sight. However, his few teleportation moves were helpless against the simple brute force clone tactic. Lloyd was in the same predicament. Although there were many clones, they could only perform simple actions, and would eventually be figured out by Gizarm. But for a certain purpose, Lloyd knew the risks, yet continued to insist on close combat. The next moment, many puppets were pierced by the magic spear. One was blocked by a barrier. Gizarm thought this one was the real body, but unexpectedly, this one was also a puppet. Facing such an adversary stirred Gizarm's emotions. Lloyd approached invisibly, insisting on close combat for a reason: this special magic sword. He had woven the spell Magic Absorption into the blade, which analyzed various kinds of magic. At that moment, Lloyd wanted to use this Magic Absorption magic sword to analyze Gizarm's Shadow Wolf, and Grim was truly impressed with Lloyd. Just to study this magic, Lloyd was willing to risk his own life. Grim really wanted to urge Lloyd to flee, but he knew all too well that this young man would never run away because he was a complete magic fanatic. At that moment, Lloyd had already struck the Shadow Wolf and entered its world. There, he encountered the legacy left by Jade. Following this, Lloyd dispelled all his magic. Seeing the injuries on Lloyd's face, Gizarme realized that Lloyd had never used a barrier. Even Gizarme had to admire such a crazy tactic. He recognized that, like himself, this child had a broken part inside. Gizarm saw Lloyd as a kindred spirit and even invited him to become his companion. However, Lloyd did not respond. If he would not submit, then he must die. But Gizarme had never anticipated that Lloyd would see through his coordinate shift. Lloyd landed a direct punch to the abdomen, and this attack was very effective. That punch was not merely a physical attack. Lloyd had used a technique involving energy. In fact, the moment Lloyd struck the Shadow Wolf, he had already achieved his goal. Thus, he no longer held back. He encouraged Gizarm to show him more moves, challenging him if he had no moves of his own. Gizarm kept getting hit, unable to comprehend how Lloyd could master the coordinates. He was blasted through to the soil layer, beneath which lay deadly lava. If he sank into the lava, even Gizarm could not recover indefinitely. He teleported to above the field of view again, but Lloyd's attacks followed closely. Lloyd taunted again, and the next second, he manipulated the magic in the air, gathering it into a huge energy ball. Lloyd used the same magic to neutralize the Black Death Jade. In Lloyd's eyes, the so-called Black Death Jade was merely a space-based magic, void. These two spells were only different in name. Years ago, when he discovered this magic, he began bombarding various things. Later, he grew bored and casually shaped 2 rows of void for fun. When these 2 rows of void collided, the magic mutually annihilated and disappeared, which is why Lloyd was able to block the attack. However, Gizarme completely refused to believe what Lloyd said. In his view, it was impossible for a human to unleash Black Death Jade, not to mention Lloyd's ridiculous claim of colliding 2 rows. He decided to expose Lloyd's lies himself, but it was not until he touched Lloyd that he experienced the true abyss of magical power. Lloyd silenced Gizarm with sheer force. Even if the opponent teleported away, Lloyd had already locked onto his coordinates. Meanwhile, Lloyd's friends and family were fighting against ordinary demons. The massive steam obscured their vision, preventing them from seeing Lloyd's battle in the sky. The first to notice something was wrong was the second prince. The sun should have risen by this time. Could the sunlight be obscured by the steam? The Assassin's Guild also looked up to the sky, guessing what might be happening. Meanwhile, Lloyd's magic had covered the entire sky. This spell made it impossible for Gizarm to regenerate. If he were sucked in, he would truly die. Realizing this, he immediately abandoned his body. However, at this moment, Jade's body bit into him. Knowing that to continue like this would only lead to death, Gizarme surprisingly disguised himself as Jade, regaining consciousness. But Lloyd did not believe him. Between his fingers, Lloyd once again formed a void. He continuously cried out for help using Jade's consciousness. In the end, Gizarme was instantly killed, but Jade's will still dissipated in the air. Watching this scene, Ren also recalled his past with Jade. Back then, Jade, excited, gathered everyone to tell them about the legend of the birth of the 7th prince. The magic released by the newborn prince had blown up the palace. If such a magical prodigy really existed, he might be able to blow away our curse and this dungeon and take us under the sun. Lloyd erected a tombstone for Jade. Jade's body had already been annihilated in the void. Now, setting up a monument was merely a formality, but Lloyd was willing to do all this. At this time, Grimm also praised Lloyd's prowess. Though the void was an extremely slow spell, Lloyd could hit Gizarme accurately. It wasn't until Lloyd explained that Grimm understood that Lloyd had completely deciphered the teleportation magic and written a formula during the fight that could sense the Shadow Wolf. Therefore, no matter where Gisarm teleported, Lloyd could follow immediately. Grimm was incredibly surprised to hear that one could analyze and write formulas while fighting. Lloyd admitted that Gizarme was indeed strong, but at the moment he struck the Shadow Wolf, what he saw was a neatly arranged formula left by Jade. At the last moment of his life, he had completely formalized the Shadow Wolf's formula before the demon possessed the body. Later, the second prince also found Lloyd. By this moment, he had learned about Jade and the Assassin's Guild's identities. However, the guild members helped Lloyd hide some truths. The second prince stated that he had them under control, his expression very serious, because the guild members were willing to follow Lloyd and atone, but the second prince was not sure if Lloyd was aware of this. In his view, members of the Assassin's Guild were residents of the Dark World. If they made any missteps, everything would be your responsibility. Not only that, you would also bring shame to the Shalu royal family. Lloyd understood his brother's words, promised to educate them well, and take responsibility. Hearing this, the second prince finally felt relieved. He said that the royal family's reputation didn't matter. In front of the identity of the seventh prince, "You are first and foremost my brother Ya." Meanwhile, Tao also arrived at the battlefield. She had rushed over immediately after hearing that Lloyd had been abducted. However, once she sensed the atmosphere at the scene, she realized she was too late. Afterwards, everyone held a tea ceremony at Jade's grave as a final farewell. The guild members also got drunk. As for Lloyd, he discovered a hot spring in the castle. Silpha, Ren, and the third princess were all there. Ren requested to stay by Lloyd's side as a maid to repay her gratitude, but Lloyd outright refused her. Lloyd stated that she should no longer call herself cursed. Poisonous abilities, if deeply understood and finely controlled, could also be used to save lives. Hearing this, Ren finally resolved her years-long dilemma. It turns out that this curse, which had always been with her, could one day become a means to save others. Let's all work hard together.